Story number one. If you are working nights in a cemetery, let me tell you, it is nothing like the movies. I am in my late 40s and my name is John. I work as a cemetery night shift worker. I know there are a lot of people who wouldn't accept this job, but if you are on the verge of becoming broke, anything suits you. That's why I took this job. Back to my point, unlike movies, there's no fog swirling endlessly at your ankles, no menacing silhouettes ducking between headstones. Mostly it's endless quiet, broken by the creak of a settling mausoleum and the distant whoop of coyotes across the river bend. But that peace started unraveling last spring when the late visitors began to come. It was early April, just past the season's first thaw. The ground was muddy enough to suck your boots in with every step, and the air still snapped with a chill by midnight. I'd been the night groundskeeper at the old Linden Rest Cemetery for the better part of 15 years, and felt like I knew every gravestone, every root and wormhole. That night I made my usual rounds with a mag light and a thermos of black coffee, watching my breath shimmer in the beam. I reached the northwest corner, the oldest part of the cemetery, where Higby and Marlowe and the other 1800s families lie beneath stones, leaning sharp as teeth. That's when I noticed something off about Mrs. Boucher's plot. There, at her grave's center, was a fresh bouquet of white lilies, still dewy and crisp, arranged in a strange spiral, petals facing outward like they'd just been placed hours ago. Nothing too strange at first glance, I told myself. Maybe a relative stopped by before dusk, and I missed their car. But Mrs. Boucher's family hadn't visited in 2 years, not that I'd seen, and these flowers were absolutely fresh, not even wilted at the edges in the night air. Mud caked the stems, but the grass around was untouched, no footprints leading in or out. I bent to inspect and nearly jumped at the sharp scent. Almost medicinal, too sharp for lilies. Behind me, the wind picked up, carrying with it a low, keening whistle that seemed to circle right through my jacket. And that's when I felt someone's presence, lingering behind me as if whatever it was waiting for me to turn back. I laughed nervously, chalked it up to nerves and movement in the branches, told myself to quit watching so many late-night horror movies. An hour later, making my way past the row of granite angel statues near the Eastern Mausoleum, I started picking up on more that didn't make sense. Every statue seemed to have turned, not by much, just a fraction. Heads that looked slightly more skyward than usual, wings flared just a bit wider, as if caught mid-stretch. I stopped and looked hard at the biggest one, hands folded in prayer. The curl of her lips was ever so faintly twisted, neither smile nor frown. It sent a shudder through me. I heard something ruffle behind me. My heart started beating a bit faster. Upon looking back, I found nothing but a fallen branch. I looked for any broken tree stumps, but couldn't find any. It was as if the branch had been there on its own. Suddenly, things went wrong and worse after a few times. While going back, I saw the statues. All of the heads turned in my direction, staring straight through me, and then their eyes glowed, red, bright enough for me to chicken out. I ran as fast I could, still not able to believe what my eyes saw. At the main path, my walkie crackled, just a burst of static, then silence. When I called in to the day manager, no answer. Annoyed and creeped out, I returned to my rounds. Now slightly fearful, checked the perimeter fence. Found nothing but fat raccoon prints and streaks of mud. That's when my cell buzzed in my coat. I checked the number. Private. No caller ID. I almost left it. But the quiet made the ring sound impossibly loud, so I finally answered. On the other end, just soft singing, no words but a kind of lullaby in a brittle, trembling voice. There was a strange sound beneath it, like two stones tapping, then the unmistakable rustle of earth being shoveled. I froze, every muscle tensing up. "Who's there?" I barked, but the line died, falling back to silence. I tried to convince myself it was a prank or some bored teenager who got my number from the office. Maybe they watched me from behind the fence, laughing as I stared around like a fool. But no flashlight beams swept the darkness. Nothing stirred. I thought that maybe that day, my mind had been playing tricks, but the next few nights, things got worse. Always more fresh flowers, sometimes daisies, sometimes carnations, left on the oldest graves, all arranged with unnatural symmetry, always in that spiral. When it rained, the petals stayed perfect, untouched by mud or decay, but the ground around would be turned, little heel marks pressed deep into the wet, but with a strange drag, as if whoever left them walked with their toes pointed slightly inward. Sometimes marks like someone dragging their body through the mud also appeared. Unexplainable, but it was enough for me to question things. Once I found a child's velvet shoe, half buried at the foot of a grave no one visits anymore, still tied and neatly placed. On another round, I caught a whiff near Grant's crypt, a powerful scent of sulfur, burnt hair, like a spent match. Beneath the crypt door, a snarl of white ribbons splayed out, knotted tightly into bows, as if left for a ghost's birthday. The calls came again, always after 2 a.m., always from an unknown number. I would hear footsteps crunching on dead leaves, then a damp, heavy breathing, and occasionally the softest giggle, young, childish, echoing out, fading into a shoveling sound. One night there was a thud like dirt being packed, then the call dropped. I blocked the number, but the next call came through anyway. I tried to shake it off, told myself it was teenagers, drones, animatronic pranks, anything modern and explainable. The police didn't take me seriously, and neither did the manager. I started bringing my field journal along, jotting any odd sign down. Every time something odd happened, I couldn't get the courage to write it down. It felt too out of the world. People reading that would probably think that I was out of my mind. On several mornings, I'd wake up to new entries I didn't remember writing. Messy loops claiming some ancient message, written in a handwriting that felt familiar, but I still couldn't figure if it was mine or not. I stopped drinking the night coffee. I thought I was hallucinating. The one night that truly broke me came after a week of sleepless unease. I was making a final lap before sunrise, trying to will some courage into my tired bones, when I saw it. Footprints, bare, narrow, smaller than mine, too small really for any adult, leading away from a freshly reseeded grave. They trailed through the wet grass, curved past a marble cross, and stopped at the crumbling cemetery wall. There, pressed into the mossy stone, was a child's handprint, fingers splayed wide as if bidding farewell. No one had reported a break-in. The autogates had not registered an entry. I tried to laugh it off, say children sometimes come with families, but the last funeral in that lot had been 4 months ago, and the security tape was nothing but static from 2 to 4 a.m. On my next shift, I brought all my courage and waited, standing by Mrs. Boucher's grave as midnight etched itself across the sky. The wind chimes by my shed began to ring, not randomly, but in a slow, inverted tune, from low note to high, as if someone was playing a song backward. Just as I was barely registering what was going on, I saw them. The statues, marble ones, all looking at me in the scariest way possible, their grins too wide and their eyes glowing with red lights. The statues, all of them, looked evil, as if sent by demons. And then, one of them flew towards me. I swear to God, I saw it flying towards me, trying to attack. The next thing I remember was that my manager found me lying near Mrs. Boucher's grave, exactly in a way a dead person inside a grave would lie. The only difference, I was lying on the ground. I have no recollection of what happened and how I ended up in that place, but it was enough to give me chills going down my spine, spreading like a disease inside my body. The most annoying thing, I don't know how to explain any of these incidents without looking like a fool. After that, I started keeping my thermos filled with scalding coffee, never alcohol, never anything that might cloud my senses. Some nights nothing happens, and I let myself hope it's over. Then I find another bouquet, impossibly fresh, or a stone angel's hand suddenly crossed over its chest, or a new, soft footprint pressed in the mud. I work the night shift alone. I tell myself it's just memory, animals, local pranksters. I almost believe it, but some nights, standing among the leaning stones, feeling the earth's cold breath at my ankles, I can sense someone watching, waiting, and sometimes on the coldest, loneliest hours before dawn, I think I can almost make out the words of that lullaby, rising from the old dark ground. Story number 2, I've been working nights as a CNA, certified nursing assistant, at an assisted living home in Western Illinois for the last 5 years. Night shifts are an acquired taste. Most people can't handle the lull, the way the darkness creeps into every room, or the cold, sterile flicker of hallway lights. But for me, it's just a quieter kind of hard work. Or at least it was. Until a few weeks ago, things started happening on the third floor. The third floor is different from the others. Fewer residents, more empty rooms. They use it for overflow, or when they're doing maintenance elsewhere. On nights when the building is full, we'll shuffle people up there. But lately, it's been mostly locked and dark. 3 of the 6 rooms unoccupied, 1 under renovation for water damage. The nurses joke that the third floor has its own personality: flickering lights, unpredictable heating, electrical problems. The kind of stuff you can blame on old wiring and slapdash repairs. Or at least you could. It started on one of those nights when the weather was unpredictable, somewhere in between seasons. The world outside the windows seemed humid, and violent storms took over the sky. I was doing my rounds, checking each room at 2 a.m. as quietly as I could. As I stepped out of room 314, I saw something odd on the hallway floor just outside room 317. A pair of black orthopedic shoes, the kind with the wide Velcro straps that half our residents wear. But nobody on that wing was missing shoes, and all the rooms on this side were locked and empty, except 317. That was the one with the water damage, under repair. The door always closed when I did my checks. The shoes were perfectly placed, side by side, toes pointing toward the door, as if someone had just slipped them off and walked barefoot into the locked room. I can't explain why, but it made my skin crawl seeing them there. So precise, so deliberate, like the way a child parks their favorite toys, or a ritual offering to something watching in the dark. The hall was quiet. I could hear the hum of the vending machine down the hall, the gentle whir of the air vent overhead. No footsteps, no shuffling elderly slippers. Just those shoes, alone. I squatted down and touched one. It was ice cold, almost slick with condensation, like it had been left outside in a November fog. The lining was damp, not wet but clammy, as if soaked with sweat from someone trapped in a fever dream. I kept looking at the door, afraid something might open it, but the knob didn't turn, and I was alone. I snapped a picture on my phone, intending to show it to my coworker Mark at breakfast, then picked up the shoes. They were heavier than I expected. For a wild second, I expected them to be warm or pulsing like a trapped animal. But nothing happened. I put the shoes at the nurse's station, figuring Lost and Found would deal with them in the morning. I popped into the staff bathroom to splash water on my face, shook off the weird chill, got back to my rounds. But when I did my last sweep before shift change, the shoes were no longer at the nurse's station. I thought maybe Mark or someone else had stashed them, but the office was empty. As I walked back up the hall, my heart caught in my throat. The shoes were back outside room 317, in exactly the same spot, precisely arranged as if I'd never touched them. Except, this time there were faint, muddy imprints on the faded terrazzo floor. Small, broad soles, the tread smudged, and in front of the shoes, bare footprints, dull and faint, leading up to the door of 317. Not away, just toward. The footprints stopped at the threshold. Nothing else. No footprints going back the other way. I tested the door, still locked. I called maintenance, said maybe a resident got in by mistake somehow and left their shoes behind. They were as puzzled as I was and went room to room across all floors. No one missing shoes, no one asleep barefoot. The cameras on the third floor have been offline for months. They shrug, say maybe my mind's playing with me. The shoes go missing again before sunrise. The next 2 nights, it gets weirder. I hear shuffling at 2:17 a.m., a precise, slow scrape, soft as someone adjusting their slippers just outside my station. Once, I swear I heard a faint, scratchy humming, like a nursery rhyme half remembered, coming from the closed door of 317. I find the shoes out there, same spot. Sometimes the laces look tied, sometimes they're loose and flopping. Sometimes the insides are packed with dead, gray leaves that weren't there before. Once the hallway reeks of damp earth, like someone tracked mud from a fresh grave. I asked the day nurse if anyone died in 317. She looks at me for a long moment, then shakes her head. No one for a few years, just plumbing issues. But she doesn't meet my eyes. I learn not to touch the shoes. The one night I do, out of desperation, just to prove to myself that I could, the fire alarm goes off at 3:08 a.m. for no reason, and a freezing draft races down the hall, making the lights blink and my heart lunge into my ribs. Now, every night, I walk faster when I pass that door. If I look directly at the shoes, I get this crawling sense at the back of my head, like I'm being watched from behind the peephole. I want to think it's faulty wiring or a prank, but when Mark covers my shift, nothing happens. No shoes, no humming, no footprints. Only I see them. Only on my rounds, always at the same hour. Sometimes as I'm clocking out, I check my phone's photo roll. The picture I took that first night of the shoes, it's gone. Deleted. Not in the trash, not on the cloud. Gone, like maybe it never existed at all. I still work nights, but I never walk unarmed anymore. I carry a heavy flashlight, and I never ever look too long at that third-floor hallway. Because some nights, out of the corner of my eye, I think I see a pair of bare, gray feet standing just ahead, waiting patiently at the door, wanting something I can't, or won't, give back. Maybe it's all in my head. Maybe it's not. But the shoes always come back, and I wish I knew why. Story number 3 is, my name is Greg, and I have been working overnights at the Sunoco off Route 41, which never bothered me much. Sure, I'd have to deal with the occasional drunk looking for beef jerky or the rare trucker with eyes like doom. But mostly it was dead quiet. 3 in the morning's a weird hour out here. The world stripped down to the hum of fluorescent lights, the buzz of the soda cooler, and the thick silence that rolls in between. I'd been running the graveyard shift for 5 months when the weirdness started. It was late February, bone cold outside, and my breath clouded even inside the store. I must have restocked the candy shelf for the 3rd time when I glanced up at the CCTV screen. Its glow was the only light besides the cashier counter's lamp. That's when I heard it, a soft crunch of gravel, headlights slashing through the night fog. A Chevy Malibu looked white, though it was so caked with dirty snow I couldn't swear. The guy who got out was unremarkable. Late 20s, round face, dull brown jacket, ball cap low over his eyes. He strode in, didn't meet my gaze, bought a pack of Camels and a bottle of orange Gatorade, just like a dozen other guys that week. Paid cash, said, "Bathroom key?" in a voice tired as dust. "Hooks on the wooden board to your right," I muttered, sliding the pack over. I watched him amble to the tiny single-stall restroom at the far end. He was in and out quick, the kind of guy who never leaves a tip in the jar. He pulled away and I lost myself in refilling the coffee. The minutes dragged. I was watching the microwave tick down while my hot pocket spun when I heard the bell chime again. Same growl of tires on dirty concrete. I turned expecting some bored college kid, but there he was. The same guy, same car, same ducked shoulders and cap. I froze. No way, I thought. I looked over the guy, sure I'd imagine it, but it was him to the last scuff on his boots. He bought the same things, handed me a $5 bill, took the Camels and Gatorade, asked for the bathroom key. My voice cracked. "You, just used it, didn't you?" He blinked, eyes blank. "First time here tonight," he said quietly. Then he slipped off to the back, just the same as before. I stared after him. When he left, I hopped down to the bathroom, expecting him to be in there. He was gone. The air stank faintly of stale cigarettes and orange, like fingerprints left in midair. Goosebumps broke out along my arms. I checked the security tape for the hell of it. Wanted to see if the guy's twin was playing some joke. The timestamp told me both visits had happened. One at 1:47 a.m. exactly, one at 1:53 a.m. Both showed him, same clothes, same order. I studied the footage, trying to spot some detail off. It all looked right, but every time he approached the counter, the camera glitched. His outline fuzzed, like he was both there and not. Static loomed just over his right shoulder. At 2:04 a.m., the bell chimed again. I flinched. I'm not ashamed to admit it. The Malibu rolled up once more, headlights spitting blue-white light across the empty lot. Third time, it squealed into the same spot. Guy got out, shirt untucked, boots muddy. Now either I'd been pranked on the grandest scale or something was wrong with my mind. But it was him. He walked up and, this time, shivered before speaking. "Pack of camels," he muttered, voice like it ached, "and a Gatorade." As if something had eroded out of him, the weariness growing. He slid the cash across the counter with trembling hands, his eyes meeting mine at last. Bloodshot, pupils oddly wide in the glare. Now I was scared. I tried to joke, "You sure you want another round?" My words felt thick, hard to push out. Sweat prickled my palms. He didn't laugh, just stared at the counter, chewing on his lip. "Repeat after repeat, right?" he whispered so faintly I almost missed it. Then, "Do you ever feel stuck?" I handed him the bathroom board, forcing a grin I didn't feel. He trudged back. Slow like gravity was heavier. I watched the CCTV. The feed fuzzed, then fizzled out as he entered the restroom. The time on the monitor flickered, ticking back 1 minute, then forward 2. My reflection stared at me from the after-midnight window, pale and stretched. After he left, the staleness clung like a fog. A strange cold rolled out of the restroom, deeper than the winter wind outside. For a second, it sounded like someone crying from the heat vent. Short, sharp gasps swallowed by the hum of the compressor. I checked the logbook. I write down every customer out of habit. I flip back and forth. The same name, every time. T. McCleary. 3 times, nearly the same handwriting, each one shakier than before. I don't ask for names, but there they were. I tried to show the book to my boss after, but one entry had vanished, ripped out, clean, like it was never written. The shift dragged. No more customers. At 3, I brewed fresh coffee, trying to shrug off the chill. I looked up and caught sight of myself in the security glass. My reflection flickered. For a heartbeat, my lips moved, but my face was slack and wrong. The kind of wrong that'll stain your dreams. By dawn, the drills of reality numbed it out. My boss came in at 6, cracking a joke about how dead the place had been. I tried to play it cool, nodded, left early. But I keep thinking about the customer's last words. "Do you ever feel stuck?" It hasn't happened since, but on the quietest nights, the CCTV monitor buzzes with faint blue static, and sometimes I swear I see headlights slow out of the corner of my eye, even when the pumps are dead. Still, I convince myself it was exhaustion, broken equipment, and overtaxed imagination. But part of me wonders, every graveyard shift, what if some loops don't break? And what if, next time, I'm the one behind the counter who never leaves? Story number 4. I work nights as the parking attendant for an office tower downtown. We've got a 5-story underground garage, concrete and steel, and never really warm, with only a few flickering overheads to push back the kind of darkness you only get deep under city streets. Most nights are uneventful. Checking license plates, helping suits find their keys, drinking burnt coffee at the booth while I wait for the last car to crawl out after midnight. But lately I've started wondering if this place is more alive than I ever thought. Or less. Maybe it's just a trick of the hours or my own nerves acting up, but it's turning into something I can't quite laugh off. The first weird thing was a couple of months back. It was almost 2 a.m., and the whole building was silent except for my own footsteps ringing off the pillars. I was about to lock up and do my walkthrough when my intercom buzzed. A car was trying to leave from row D, space 43. I checked the feed on camera 6. Just a ghostly blur and nothing else. But the red tail lights flicked on, then off, right where the sensor said. Maybe a stray animal had tripped it, I told myself. Maybe condensation or the motion sensor was acting up. Still, I took the elevator down and walked the whole row, flashlight clutched tight. The spot was empty. No car, just a faint puddle of oil and a weird chemical smell, almost sweet and metallic. I shook it off and went back to the booth, just anxious to get home. But that ghost car started happening every few nights. Always spot 43, always when the garage should have been empty. The camera feed would get grainy when I focused on that spot. Sometimes the pixelated blur would move, even when my own eyes only saw bare concrete. In my logbook, I started jotting down the time each event happened. At first, I figured it for a wiring issue and reported it for maintenance. They checked the lines, shrugged, told me not to lose sleep over it. Things started to ratchet up right after New Year's. I started hearing things. Low, engine-like whines reverberating through the floors, usually right after I powered down the lights at the far end for closing. It always sounded like an old car, laboring to start after sitting too long. But when I went to look, flashlight beam jittering on shaking hands, nothing was ever there. Snip! One night, I was doing the rounds when I found a yellowed parking stub sticking out of the pay machine in the lobby. Not our usual kind, but older, smaller, with faded ink. It said Packard Sedan, Black 1937. And the date field was stamped May 12, 1938. At first I thought maybe someone was messing with me, but the stubs kept coming. A new one every week, all listing a black Packard in spot 43. It got colder in the garage after that, like a real winter night, my breath frosty in the stupid little booth, even though the heater ran full blast. Sometimes when I locked up and headed for the elevator, all the lights behind me flickered off one by one. A heavy, deliberate clunk, 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 plunging the whole level into a darkness thicker than pitch. Once or twice, when the lights cut out, I swore I saw red taillights flare in my peripheral. Not the sharp LEDs of modern cars, but the soft, round lantern glow of something old. It didn't help that the other guard, Ed, started calling in sick. I don't blame him. I'd find my own car fogged up on the inside at shift's end, thin frost spelling out drive on the windshield, or sometimes an old pressed flower sitting on the dashboard, blackened and rotted, but holding shape. My radio, almost dead from disuse, would occasionally hiss with static just as I passed spot 43. A woman's voice at the edge of hearing, "I'm waiting, dear," before it clicked off. The worst night came a month ago, the same week my boss said they'd had reports of people seeing someone pacing the lot on the security footage. Someone in a long, dark coat. He asked if I'd let a guest in late. I hadn't, of course. But as I walked my last round, I saw faint, oily footprints smudged across the concrete from spot 43 all the way to the exit ramp. Each print was too big for a woman's shoe, but not quite a man's either. More like a child's, distorted and out of proportion, but sharp-edged as if laid that night. That's when I saw a faint silhouette, near the spot 43. It looked like the person was wearing a long coat, and from what I could believe, it was a woman. I called for her. "Excuse me, ma'am. Can I help you? It's too late to be here alone." Nothing. It was as if she couldn't hear my voice. I started walking towards her. The stretch of the road felt too long. Just when I was almost near, I saw her flying. At least that's how I would describe. I know that there's no logical explanation, but things like this don't happen logically. She was midair, her back turned. She turned halfway as if she had realized someone was there. Someone who wasn't like her. I couldn't see her face properly, but one side of her face was burnt, completely charred. That scared me the most. She looked distorted. That was the first time I ever heard the scream, metal tearing, then a woman's wail. Her wail, warped with the echoes bouncing off the garage pillars. It lasted only a second, like someone dragging a crowbar over a busted fender, but I'll never forget it. My teeth felt frozen in my head after. I closed my eyes. I don't know if it was out of fear or the fact that I didn't want to see whatever next was going to happen. When I opened my eyes, she was gone. No car, no woman, no sound. Just me and the bone-chilling air swishing through my face. From then on, I kept my walkie on, volume maxed. Sometimes around 2 a.m., the elevator would open on its own when I got back to the booth. Hung open for a minute too long, long enough for that weird, cold, burnt sweet scent to crawl out and wrap itself around my knees. I never went in. Superstitious, maybe, but I always took the stairs. One night, I worked up the nerve to bring a cheap digital camera, thinking if I got something creepy on photo, I'd figure out a logical explanation. I snapped picture after picture of spot 43, but each time all I got was a swirling gray haze with faint lines like old pinstriping almost sketched through the frame. The last shot was the worst. In the center, there was a blur that maybe could have been a face, except the eyes were blank and the smile stretched so wide it looked cut. The date time stamp under that photo read May 12th, 1938, 2:13 a.m., which matched the stub. No one else ever reported a thing. The cameras showed nothing, or so they said. When I asked around, a couple of the older office workers said the building replaced an old hotel that burned down in the 30s, but the records stopped short of naming any victims. The boss started giving me extra breaks, probably because my face went white every time I heard engines on the street above. I'm still here, obviously, working for bills and tips. I keep my music low and the booth door shut, but now as soon as midnight hits, I stay away from that far row. If I have to pass a spot 43, I go quick, try not to look too closely. Sometimes, though, I can't help myself. There in the dim light, I catch the echo of a shadow inside the lines, like someone hunched over a steering wheel, unmoving, forever waiting. I told myself it's a prank, or sleep deprivation, or echoes in old concrete, but I never park close anymore. I never leave last. And on those rare, lonely nights when the lights go out in a line and a heavy quiet weighs in, I swear I still see that ghostly taillight flicker, red and patient, with a silhouette of a woman standing still, promising a ride for someone who'll never come home. Story number 5. I used to work nights as a campus custodian at my old college, which was weird enough, but winter break was straight up liminal. The halls echo differently at night when nobody's around. Everything smells like pine sol, cold stone, and the stale remains of hundreds of students who've just left for vacation. I'd plug in my earbuds, zone out, and let the rumble of the vacuum fill my brain. That was my normal. One December night, maybe halfway through my shift, I was making rounds on the 3rd floor of the administration building. There's this old, creaky corridor with heavy fire doors, painted government issue green. I always hated that hallway, the kind that looks the same whether it's noon or 3 in the morning. That night, I could feel the cold more than usual, especially near room 323. The other offices were locked, lights off, but 323 had this thin bar of yellow leaking out under the door. Harsh, artificial, way too bright for a nighttime lamp. At first, I thought my eyes were screwing with me, but as I got closer, I realized, nope, it was definitely light. I knocked. You're supposed to check in case a professor pulled an all-nighter or something. No answer, but I heard something from inside, soft, uneven shuffling, like shoes scraped lightly across the carpet, moving too slowly for a person, almost dragging. Have you ever heard the sound of fabric on carpet late at night when it should be dead silent? It twitches right in your spine. I tried my key. Nothing. The lock refused to turn, even though it fit. I was standing there in the freezing corridor, palms starting to sweat, when I heard someone whispering. It started barely above a breath, but got more frantic the longer I stood. "Let me out! Let me out! Let me out!" The voice sounded wrong, panicked but flat, like listening to audio through thick glass. I was thinking, maybe someone really was stuck in there. Maybe the door jammed after a late study session. But as I bent to look through the crack under the door, I felt this sharp burst of cold sweep through me, colder than any busted window or draft. My knuckles went pale, and then just as I was trying, I suddenly saw 2 eyes staring back through the crack, but it felt as the eyes didn't belong to any human. Pitch white with the smallest pupils. It scared the shit out of me. I jerked back, almost crashing into the floor. And then, all at once, the light under the door snapped off, plunging the hall into darkness, so absolute I swear it pressed on my skin. Backing up, my heart thumping, I half ran to the main security desk. The whole way I kept feeling like something was following me. Not footsteps exactly, but this heaviness, as if the corridor itself was swelling shut behind me. At the desk, I babbled about the locked office in the voice, but the duty security guy was half asleep and just grunted that nobody should be in 323. He made a note, but didn't move from his chair. Even though I didn't want to, I went back 15 minutes later. This time the hall felt warmer, normal almost. Room 323's door was standing slightly open. That strange, sickly light was gone, replaced with the regular pale moon from the windows. I pushed the door. It opened easily. no resistance, nothing broken. Inside, everything was just as it should be. Desk neat, the rolling chair pushed in, a stack of yellowed folders sitting tidy. Except for one thing, right in the middle of the cheap carpet in front of the window was a circle of water, dark and uneven, maybe a foot across. In the center was a patch of carpet matted down so flat it somehow looked burned, or pressed under something very heavy for hours. I reached out to touch it, and the wet was icy cold, making my fingertips sting. There was no sign of where the water came from. No leaks from pipes, no open windows, no footprints leading in or out. Not possible. I called out, "Hello?" quietly like an idiot. The silence that came back vibrated in my skull. It was so quiet I heard my own blood rushing in my ears. I suddenly couldn't stand the sweet, rotten smell hanging in the room, like pond water gone bad or wilted flowers left too long on a grave. Seconds later, I felt watched. I don't mean I saw something. I mean I could feel pinpoint attention drilling into the back of my neck. The only sound was that whisper replaying in my mind. "Let me out, let me out." I swear I heard the faintest scratching at the window, steady and deliberate, as if nails or something much sharper were tracing the frost on the glass. I shut the door, locked it, and put a maintenance out of order sign on it for the rest of my shift. That night, every room I entered felt shadowed, a little colder, a little heavier. In the supply closet, the glass cleaning bottle shattered, unprovoked. In the hallway, the motion sensor lights flicked on and off, sometimes in sequence down the corridor, as if something was walking the opposite way from me. I asked around the next week, but nobody else ever reported an issue. The building manager blamed old pipes for the water, faulty wiring for the lights. I wanted to believe him, but I started carrying salt in my pocket just in case. My grandma used to say it helped with things like these. Unexplainable ones. Now sometimes I still dream about that yellow light under the door and the cold, flat voice whispering for help. Was it a stuck professor? Jammed lock? Bad trick of the sleep-deprived mind? I don't know, but some doors I don't ever want to open again. Story number 7. I am Amelia, and I've worked as a night nurse for almost 7 years. If you know anyone who does this job, especially in a small-town ER, they'll tell you, 99% of the time, it's exhaustion, bad coffee, and an endless hallway echoing with those overhead fluorescent lights buzzing faintly. I'm so used to weirdness, shrieking detoxers, people screaming about angels, the occasional full moon patient, that I don't spook easily. We have an old psych holding room, room 7, tucked away from the trauma bays. It's been there forever. The walls are covered in ancient hospital-grade green paint that's probably toxic if you look at it too long. And they only use the room now for storage or if literally every other bed is full. During overnights, it's always empty, but everyone on the shift jokes about its vibe. I thought that was just part of the ER's collective gallows humor. Friday night, early spring, end of a double shift. I was running on fumes, doing inventory runs since we were short-staffed. At 3:30 a.m., most of the ER was quiet for once, except the occasional faint groans or metallic coughs from the vents. As I made my way past room 7, I got this strange, heavy feeling, almost like someone had thrown a weighted blanket over my head, making the hallway thick. I shrugged it off, thinking about caffeine and maybe seeing if there was a sandwich left in the break room. But as I passed, I could swear I saw a figure in my peripheral vision. No detail, just there. 1 second, gone the next, right by the interior glass window of room 7. I stopped, backed up, looked in, empty. Just the faded mattress on a gurney, a broken wall clock stuck on 219, the weird old red chair nobody sits in because all 4 legs wobble. Whatever, it's 3:30 in the morning, and I'm tired. I keep going. Over the next hour, every run past room 7 felt worse, like something inside that room was awake, tracking me, only moving when my back was turned. Sometimes when I passed, I thought I heard a low, rhythmic tapping inside, a soft, hollow sound, almost like a slow heartbeat in the wall. The 4th time by, I caught something moving again. This time it looked like a hand pressed to the inside of the glass, misting it slightly from within. I blinked hard, steadied my breath, and it was gone. I forced myself not to look in again. I did my next run with the crash cart. Coming back, I passed the doorway, and a sudden chemical stench hit me. Sharp, rotten, and sweet, like decaying food soaked in antiseptic. I stopped dead. From the room came a gurgling exhale, long and wet, like the death rattle I'd heard 100 times before, but somehow deeper, rougher. I could feel it in my own lungs, as if it were echoing there. I radioed up to the nurse's desk, asking if anyone had put a patient in room 7, maybe a transfer I'd missed. They checked the board. Room 7 had been empty for hours. Nobody had so much as signed the key out. For some reason, I had to look. I swiped my badge, opened the door with the old sticky handle. The room was colder than the corridor and so quiet, my own ears rang. Still, that chemical smell, now with something else beneath it, like wet earth, or meat left too long in a closed freezer. The gurney was untouched, but the sheets were rumpled in the shape of a curled-up body, as if someone had just stood up a moment before. On the glass facing the hall, the condensation from a handprint lingered. 5 smudges fanned out like someone desperate to open the door. My own breath fogged in the cold air, and seconds later, I swear I saw my vapor tracing out a second, smaller handprint on the inside of the glass. Goosebumps ran the length of my arms. While standing inside the room, I felt as if something was off. Something didn't feel right. The eeriness was looming. But then, a cold drop of something sticky fell on me. That was odd, unless I touched it just to check what it was. Saliva. I was sure of it, but the question was how it fell off the ceiling. I still remember that day. I shouldn't have looked above. I stood there frozen. With the remaining courage, I looked up and saw a shadow clinging to the ceiling. It's back down, but it looked abrupt. Weird, sticking itself on its fours, moving slowly as if circling its prey. I couldn't decipher if it was a human or an animal or something else, but whatever it was, it sent shivers down my spine. I tried running, but it was as if someone had glued my feet to the ground. I couldn't move. Tried screaming, but no noise came out. I could only look at the creature, looming over me, and I was just hoping that it was just a fever dream. I could hear loud gurgles, as if it was waiting for something before it pranced off on me. And then, it just simply crawled out of the window. I stood there watching all of this, but still not having any idea how to explain what I saw. Once it was gone, I exhaled. That's when I realized that I had been holding my breath. I exited the room as fast and calm I could. In the hallway, it was so quiet I could hear the electric hum of the overhead light. Still, under that hum, there was the faintest whispering, almost like a lullaby in a language I didn't know, rattling just beneath my hearing. I stood perfectly still, forcing my brain to find a rational explanation. Draft, old pipes, a memory of a song. My heart was pounding anyway. Then from across the hall, motion set off the automatic soap dispenser in the supply alcove, which never happens unless someone waves a hand under it. I stared into the empty hallway. The blue soap oozed down the sink in a thick, sluggish ribbon, slow as syrup, forming a spiral on the porcelain. Standing alone in the cold, a rotten chemical breeze drifting over me, I realized every hair on my body was standing on end. I backed out, brushed past a sudden chill. The door stuck as I swung it shut, groaning like a sigh. I wrote maintenance on a sticky note, slapped it over the handle, and hurried back to the nurse's desk. They thought I was sleepy. Maybe I was. Maybe it was a stress hallucination, a byproduct of burnout and too much hospital coffee. But every time I walk past that room now, late at night, the air goes cold, and I smell that same wilted, sweet stench. And sometimes I swear the red chair inside isn't where it used to be. I still work here. I still have to make those runs past room 7. I tell myself it's just in my head. Most nights that works, but not all of them. Story number 8. I am an international student pursuing a finance major at a college nearby. I work part-time and pull solo overnight shifts at a tiny 24/7 convenience store out in the sticks, 2 miles from the next traffic light. The kind with a flickering ice cream sign. the same 3 lottery tickets behind the register for years, and a bell above the door that sometimes rings when nobody's there. But you know, most nights it's more boring than scary. Bad country radio, the hum of the coolers, maybe a drunk or two from the bar down the road looking for microwave burritos. We have these round, convex safety mirrors mounted in the corners, so you can see down the aisles without leaving the front. They're just dusty glass bubbles that warp your reflection, turning everyone into a weird bulbous shape, usually just ugly enough to keep you awake. There's one by the register, 2 by the freezer, and a third one aimed right at the candy and chips. I never thought twice about that third mirror until that night in October, a dead stretch between 2 a.m. and 3 a.m., when no cars had gone by in maybe 40 minutes. Outside, the fog was so heavy that the gas station lights cut a neon yellow cone into the mist, making everything feel wrapped in a wool blanket. I was scanning in this week's late delivery, canned chili, outdated muffins, the usual, when I glanced up at the mirror. At first, I thought I saw someone in the candy aisle, just behind the racks, tall with a pale hoodie, unmoving. But the register monitor didn't beep, and I hadn't heard the bell on the door. I looked up again quick, and it was gone. For a few seconds, my scalp prickled, but I figured it was my own warped reflection, or a shadow from a passing car's headlights in the fog. I told myself I was tired. A few minutes later, I looked again. There it was, same pale figure, standing right between the Skittles bags and Chupa Chups, just close enough that the overhead fluorescence should have cast a shadow. But the figure was blurrier now, almost washed out, like bad static on a channel not quite tuned. It shifted when I blinked, but never when I looked directly. It's hard to explain. It was like the mirror was showing a scene out of sync with reality. Every instinct told me not to check, but my feet moved anyway. Little stick and squeak steps on the scuffed linoleum. I rounded the end cap, heart pounding, but there was nothing there except the faintest whiff of something I couldn't quite place. Cold air, old fabric, a weird clay smell, like dirt from the back of an unused closet. The shelves were perfectly lined up and nothing was disturbed. I went back, tried to keep my head down and focus on restocking. But the longer I worked, the more I couldn't keep from glancing at that mirror every minute or two. And every single time, that blurry, tall shape was either a half step closer or just out of frame, lingering like a smudge on my vision. At one point, I thought I saw a hand reach out and run long, impossibly thin fingers over the cheap plastic wrappers. But when I spun around, all I heard was the rattling of the air conditioner switching on. A couple of hours later, it got more intense. While I was bagging stale croissants, I heard this faint, warbling noise, like old film reel static coming from the direction of the candy aisle. The mirror's surface, I swear, seemed to ripple with every pass of the noise, like I was looking into a puddle when it started to rain. The shape in the mirror stopped resembling a person and started looking wrong. It was like every time I looked away, it grew an extra limb or hunched over at a new, impossible angle, and the static in my ears ratcheted louder. My hands started to shake. I left the register with a baseball bat we keep behind the counter. We're supposed to call it a defensive tool, but it's just an old Louisville slugger with electric tape. I walked the aisles, but the lights seemed dimmer the farther from the cash wrap I got. When I passed under the third mirror, I felt the air grow colder. No kidding, like I'd stepped in front of the freezer with the door open. I looked up directly, and for the briefest second, my own reflection warped, and I saw my face stretched into a screaming mask behind the glass. Something seemed to be standing right behind me in the reflection. Tall, featureless, a film of frost crawling across its silhouette. Then I blinked, and it was gone. Right then, the bell above the door rang, a wild staccato chime that sounded like it was swinging back and forth hard, but nobody had come in. The noise bounced through the aisles. For about 3 seconds, every single mirror in the store fogged up, like someone breathed on them. I stood there, heart beating a mile a minute, waiting for something to move. Nothing did. Eventually, things felt normal again. The mirrors went clear. The rest of the night passed painfully slow, but the candy aisle was ice cold every time I checked it, and my own reflection seemed off. Eyes a little too wide, smile pulled too tight. Nothing like that's happened again, but I still get nervous glancing at that third mirror when I'm alone at night. I told my manager, a classic skeptic, who insisted the mirrors are just old, warped, and catch static from the lights. Maybe he's right, but sometimes in that blue 2 a.m. fog, I catch the edges of a pale shape in the third mirror, and I can't help wondering if it's watching me and if it knows I can see it,